Hello YouTube, y'all. Welcome to another one of our videos today. Today we're going to be connecting, as you guys can see from the title, math to how toxic people meet each other. This is one of my most abstract topics that I've ever connected here, so we're going to go ahead and begin with this. For the prelude, obviously, I think of relationships in a very complex way. Obviously, life is filled with challenges. There are a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things that can go good and go bad in a relationship, and there's a lot of good you can. Alright? Sometimes not all good people meet good people and vice versa, but it does generally remain true. You attract kind of people who you are. Like, if you're a good person, you'll attract good people. If you're a toxic person, you'll attract toxic people. And now, with that out of the way, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and remove this screen right here. Bye bye. We're going to go in full explanation and turn this into a mathematical metaphor. So, now that we're going to begin, let's say that this graph here belongs to that of a toxic person. As you guys can see here, this is their graph. This is their trajectory of their life. Alright, think of it like that. The minute that someone equalizes to that of this graph, like let's say the toxic person who owns this graph, they essentially equalize to a person who's toxic to this degree. Essentially speaking, chat, the minute that you decide to be toxic yourself, even if you haven't met the other person, you eventually equalize to that of another toxic person that is to your degree or to their degree of toxicity. Think of it like that. Just as in math, y'all, if you guys want to find the connection of 2y equals mx plus b equations, you have to equalize them. I think that's the same that goes in real life. If you're toxic and you build a good degree of toxicity, someone with that similar degree of toxicity will eventually attract, or you will eventually attract to them over time. And I think that's the really big thing here. Let's say that someone who eventually becomes toxic over time, right? Let's say through their own life situation, they become as toxic as the person who owns this graph. So essentially, let's say this graph is equal to y equals 3x plus 2. So essentially, both of these people are on the same graph. They're on the same playing field with each other because they're on the same degree of toxicity. So, as you guys see, this is the graph. The minute that this person decides to equalize, they've essentially built a trajectory with this graph. Y equals 3x plus 2. This shows that even graphs that seem to go very far from each other, it can even take 30 years, 25 years, 10 years, or even 1 year. Eventually, you're gonna meet, if you become a toxic person, you're bound to meet someone too who's toxic. Mathematically, it's guaranteed to happen. Alright, I think this is definitely a very abstract theory. I'll definitely tell you all that. But just like in math, if you equalize that of two mx plus b equations, you'll find an intersection point. If you equalize to that of another person who has that same degree of toxicity, eventually you're bound to meet them in real life. Distance, just because they're years away, doesn't mean you're not gonna meet them. So think of it this way. Anyway, so two toxic people who've met, but are unsolved for each other. Eventually, these people solve for each other. Alright, so in step 2, let's make this a little bit bigger for the chat. But think of it this way. Once they meet each other through mutuals, 30, 25 years, or even a year later. Alright, so they meet through mutuals online. Let's say dating app, media, or workplace. They essentially are now in the same playing level field as each other now. Let me make this a little larger again. They've joined the same meeting place now as each other. Now, this is where they begin to solve for each other, essentially speaking. 2x plus 1. Once they find each other, let's say through mutuals, they solve for each other essentially. They build rapport. They build rapport toward one another. And what I mean by this, chat, is that symbolically meaning right here, when I'm solving for x, essentially imagine that these are the mutual friends. These are the mutual friends that we're removing as these two people begin to meet each other. They solve for each other and begin to build rapports. That's the same in math. Now that we have it simplified, we have 1x. Yes, I do write it as 1x. 1x plus 2 equals positive 1. So we do negative 2, negative 2. And then we have x equals negative 1. So, and this is after a few months. Few months later, this is where they solve for each other. This is where it happens. All right. Let's say after a few years or a few months, every relationship builds differently. So let's go ahead and plug negative 1 back in. So negative 3 plus 2 equals negative 2 plus 1. Guess what? They are equal to each other. This means essentially right here, both of these toxic people have found a match for each other. Boom. This is meeting point. This is where the toxic relationship happens and builds. Just as my theory proves right here, chat, it also challenges the idea of free will. This even says once you become toxic to such a degree, you're going to meet someone else, even in the far future, who's bound to meet you one day and match your own toxicity if you're a toxic person. But it just goes to show, chat, that math in itself is also embedded into real life. Obviously, we're not graphs, chats, alright? Obviously, we're not. But it explains a part of the complexity of humanity. If you become toxic, you'll attract people who are also toxic to your degree. Just as this, through media or workplace, they solve for each other, meaning imagine negative 2x, they're removing the variables, they're removing the other friends that they don't need. They're solving for each other. This is where I get x equals negative 1. This is where they find the match for each other. Imagine this is a metaphorical saying of them saying that they like each other. And boom, that's the meeting point. This is where the toxic relationship occurs and builds. These are two toxic people of the same degree. And just as in math, it's the same in real life. Alright. It's one thing, spontaneous thing that just came in my mind. I wanted to share this with you guys. And even then on a graph, obviously it shows it to be true. They meet at negative 1, 1. As you guys know, sometimes, well, I believe that math is also ingrained into parts of real life too. Just as math also explains the relationships in variables, it can also explain real life. It can also explain the fact that if you're toxic, you're gonna meet another variable who's toxic. Thanks for listening.